You know, you guys go out in the thick of it again, and you guys know how to track, you guys know what you're looking for, you know what you're going after. If someone else wants to do this, do they not try this at home, or do you have some advice on how to at least get something that would be clear-cut and ready to go so you have those cameras ready?
It's almost impossible to catch those on there. We've gotten one good photo. It's on the tail end of Wikipedia about the Ohio grass fan, and that photo was even blurry, and that was taken in to find out if it was fake. They ran it through the whoosher, and it came out that it's definitely real. Now that photo, you can see it online, and it's blurry. You can't get a straight up photo. It's impossible. Like you gentlemen were saying, you tried that, 20 people out there. We were at up in Ohio, and we went on a hike up on Morgan's Knob. There was, what, 135 people. We had a guy in a ghillie outfit, and no one got a photo. And they were aware of it, just like you're saying. Hey, we're going to have him out through there today. Couldn't do it. It was totally impossible.
Just like you said, the unexpected. Unless you got that camera, you've got it right there in focus. And he pops up to get that.
Yeah.
You're not going to get it.
Well, and it reminds me of when I had my experience. Okay, so I was at, you know where East City Ranch is near Trout Lake? Okay. So I was out there. I woke up on a Sunday morning. I was grumpy, of course. Didn't have my coffee. You know, I always say, give me my coffee. No one gets hurt. So I'm sitting there sipping coffee and kind of growling at everybody. You know, everybody gets to see me backstage. This is very pretty. Anyway, so I'm drinking the coffee and I'm looking across the way. You look out. There's this washing area where the washing machines. They have this little corridor where you're looking out. There's a window, and then these orchard trees are there. So I'm looking at this guy who has this. He looks like a wrestler with his shirt off, standing there eating apples out of the tree. And I'm thinking, okay, who is this guy? Because I didn't see him at all. I mean, we have a lot of people that come out there, you know, because we have UFO night there. A lot of people come there. I didn't recognize the guy or anything. So he's standing there, he's eating apples. And he had this long, curly blonde hair, kind of a brownish blonde hair. Kind of like, I describe it because it's exactly the way I thought. Like, he looked like Robert Plant from behind, because he had the hair, you know, from Led Zeppelin. So this guy's kind of like a wrestling-looking dude with blonde hair. I figured, you know, maybe it's some guy that we didn't see come in eating apples off the tree. And then I realized something really weird, and that is those apples are pretty high up. How's that guy eating the apples? So the minute I realized that, he looked at me. And what I saw is I saw a face that I will never forget. The thing had no neck, and the face was flat, like if somebody put a nylon stocking over your face. Everything was flattened down. It looked like somebody had taken a shovel and just bashed this damn person in the face. It looked like it didn't belong. And this is exactly what I did. I looked at it and I said, Bigfoot. This is what I said. It was like, it came to me like, Bigfoot. And I got Bigfoot. And I started saying, and then everybody ran towards it. They jolted out of the way. And then I realized I didn't pull out my camera. And instead of saying Bigfoot, I went, oh shit, Bigfoot. Seriously. I felt like such an ass clown because I did not get the picture. And I figured no one's going to believe me. So the only thing we got out of the deal was that this thing, when it was running away, the balls of its feet went into the mud. And then it leapt over to the other side, and the footprint went in there, and we got a good footprint. They said it was a juvenile. But, you know, we should have figured it out because the night before, a woman said that she was going back to her yurt, and a deer actually leapt over her, running away from something. She said it was terrified. And then some other guy said that in his cabin he could hear what sounded like an elk running, going, you know how they run? He says, but it sounded like laughter. He sounded like something was laughing, some strange laughter, and he didn't know what it was. I was thinking, with all the sounds I've heard, like, you know, those weird sounds we were playing, is it true that they sound like Mongolian fishermen, Shay?
I'll be honest, I'm not sure. I really don't know. I've heard those encounters, heard those stories. I personally have heard long-distance vocals that I subscribe to being interesting or suspicious. Even my encounter in 2011, I didn't hear any vocals. It was tree knocks and everything else, rocks and stuff. So, Yeah, I'm not sure. I run a podcast myself, Monster-X Radio, and I've talked to loads of witnesses, very credible witnesses, few kind of odd ones, but very credible witnesses. I don't know. A lot of interesting sounds out there, for sure.
What about you guys? Do you hear anything strange? What do you guys hear out there when you're out? I mean, you guys, like I say, you guys have the experience out in the thick of it. You guys are out there looking for this stuff, and I'm sure you got some sounds that scared the hell out of you or have the hair rise up on your beard a little bit, don't you think? A little bit?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we've heard what they call the mumbles, the chatter, whatever, and it'll set your hair, buddy, I'm telling you. And as far as the camera is, we all know, you try to stay prepared, but the minute you let your guard down, that's when it happens, you know. These creatures are, it's out there, I don't know if we'll ever get to prove that they live there or not. I hope we get the chance. And we're working really hard on it. But we've heard all the sounds that they make. Some of them we're not sure what to make them, but this is a tough job to do.
One of the latest we had, I don't mean to jump on you here, brother, but here's what it is. It was the Ash Man. This guy came in, he's wearing bibs. He's a big guy, isn't he? You met him. We both talked to him. He came in, he had voice recordings, and he said, listen to this. And it was so long. And there's nothing I know of that can make that noise that long, that has a lung capacity. And he said, now wait. And then you could hear this other one. And you knew it was a female because of the softness of how it came out. And it was real long, too. But that's right in York County, West Virginia. And that's a true fact. Come in, and it was a great recording. I did not dispute it whatsoever. It was correct. But I want to say something about photoing and taking pictures. When you all get home or something, you're taking a stationary picture, which we don't get a chance to do. You pop a hole in a piece of paper and hold it up and take that picture through that little hole. You'll be amazed at how much it shields the light, and you get a straight up, not blurry picture. And that's coming from my photographer uncle. That's all he did all his life was sentinel photo. And he said, let me show you something one day. And he showed me that. I couldn't believe how it shielded the light and took the blurriness out of something. So try that.
Sounds like a good idea. Okay, so we were talking about, you were hoping that maybe we find something because of all the hard work. You've done all the hard work everybody else has done. I want to talk about population. I want to talk about, can we have any figures of population, and are we seeing a diminishing of population of Sasquatch? Starting with you.
Well, from hearing all the experts, I don't ever claim to be one. I'm in the learning phase, and I take word from Derek and Shane and Jeff. And
yeah, I got to stop you, man. There isn't an expert in this room on this subject. You know, there are people that know a lot about our areas, but there are no Bigfoot experts. Not yet.
Seasoned veterans. There's a better word for it. And so I'm going to go with them, and I think the number's a little bit higher, but it's right around in their ballpark. That's where I'm going to go with.
Okay, Dr. Meldrum, what do you say?
Well, it's hard to give a short answer to that, and I don't have a cumulative figure, but I've used a demonstration that kind of goes state to state. But like I said here in Washington, I'd put it in the range of 200 to 400. If you go to the other states in the Pacific Northwest and Intermountain West, given the extent of the habitat, it's about the same. You know? So you start multiplying that. You've got, let's just say for ease of math, you've got an N to be on the liberal side, since that's what people tend to. 400 in Washington, 400 in Oregon, 400 in Northern California. So there you're up to 1,200. And you go into the Intermountain West and maybe double that again. So east of or west of the Mississippi in the United States, you're talking about just over 200 to 2,500.
What would the mortality rate be in your estimation?
The mortality rate or life expectancy?
Well, life expectancy. Let's put it that way. Yeah, I was thinking mortality. Let's go life expectancy.
Well, it being a grade A, if we're keeping it in the Hominoidea, the family that we and grade apes are members of, you know, a lot of the natural history variables are very same. Our gestation period, our period of development, our life expectancy is about the same. There's a positive correlation of increased longevity with increased body mass. So larger animals are bigger. The oldest gorilla in captivity, the only would have data for, since that kind of data is not really available in the wild, was 62 years old. Gorgeous, the gorilla, died when she was 62. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if Sasquatch that avoid disease or accident could easily live to be a half century, be 50 years old in the wild.
Wow. What about you, Cliff? I mean, do you have any ideas of maybe how many there are or what longevity would be?
Fewer than you think would be the answer for the numbers. And I used to think there were more. Then I started looking more closely at the data sets, footprint casts, where we have a lot of footprint casts from particular areas. Back then it was basically the Blue Mountains through the work of Paul Freeman and Wes Summerlin and those characters. Now we have a great data set from not only the Blue Mountains and Northern California, I forgot about that, the Bluff Creek area, but also we have stuff now from the Olympic Peninsula and another great data set from Kentucky that keeps giving and giving. And what we find, or what I'm finding and hypothesizing, I suppose, is that these track sets represent very few individuals. The more I've learned about their feet in general, I realize that their feet are probably almost as bendy as your hands are, and then so it's not always easy, but it's possible to track individuals over time. And so the Blue Mountain evidence, 40, 50 maybe casts or something, I'd say less than 4 or 5 individuals. The stuff we're getting out of Trimble County, Kentucky, probably including the juvenile, we're probably looking at 3 to 4, maybe 5 individuals again. It was that data that made me dramatically lower the population estimate. And as far as length of life, again, great apes live 40, 50 years or so. Sasquatches are big, so they might put a few extra years on there. Then the only data that really I have to support that at all is one witness who lives on the Olympic Peninsula. She claimed to have, these are all stories, I have nothing to back it up, although she does find footprint casts and they're very good. But she said she saw her Sasquatch when she was, I think, 8 years old or something like that. And the last time she saw a Sasquatch, she'd seen them periodically over her life. She lives in a fantastic area, backed up against a green belt, off-limits watershed, blah, blah, blah. I believe her. The last time she saw a Sasquatch had to be 8 or 10 years ago now, and she thinks it was the same Sasquatch. She's in her 60s. That pans out to about 50 years or so. That's the only data I have to support my guess, but I'm going with it.
Okay. Can I add one thing?
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
We do have a more direct example. If you look at the famous Jerry Crew footprint, that was hit the press in 1958. We have examples of that footprint that are clearly spanning about a 20-year period in that time. Repeat appearances, recognizable appearances of that individual that were cast by Bob Titmus and other people. So that individual, when he made his debut, was probably a dominant male, was in full maturity, and probably the principal dominant male of that region. So given the developmental span of a great ape, say, we're talking at least 16, 17 years to full maturity, let alone then maybe another few years to really bulk up to become the kind of silverback of the group. So there's 20 plus at least 15, so 35 years. So we have some direct evidence that they live to be at least that in the wild. So there's one. It isn't all just speculating and extrapolation.
Shane, do you have any opinions on this?
Nope. I've got an opinion. I don't know, Dr. Meldrum, if you remember, but I gotta start working with Dr. Meldrum in 1997 when he walked into my office, and I was just kind of starstruck, and he asked me if I'd join the North American Ape Project, so we got to do some stuff together for several years. And one thing that just kind of rings out to me, I don't know if you're going to remember this, but you were at my house one night, and I was showing you a very good photograph of a track that we had found way down in Burnt Fork when James hurt his leg. I don't know if you remember that. And you looked at that track, and you said, I recognize this track. And it was very similar to a track that you and Paul Freeman had found a year or two before, I believe. And you said that it absolutely looked like the same individual. That's kind of what got my mind thinking. And I got to say that, Cliff, it's really cool to hear you say that. I think we're all pretty much on the same page here with numbers. With the Olympics, my guess was 30 to 40. By the time you pull in the Cascade Mountain Range, there could easily be another 80 to 120 or whatever. So I think we're all pretty much consensus on numbers. And again, there's no way to really know, but I think over the years we're getting closer to being more accurate.
What about in other areas? I mean, we're talking about the Northwest, but what about you gentlemen? You certainly see your share out there where you're hunting all the time. I mean, what are we looking at as a variety? I mean, I know that I've heard, about the skunk ape being white-haired in some regard, or heard different sightings of what could be, for lack of a better word, werebear, werewolf, I don't know, something that stands on its hind legs about 8 feet tall. And and especially, you're out in Mothman territory. So I don't know what to ask you except, what do you see out there that would convince you there's more to it than just what we're talking about?
Put me in a corner, didn't you?
I didn't mean to. I think what you guys do is fascinating, actually.
First of all, you have to understand Ames, and you have to understand mountain monsters. We're there for the hunt. We do the research. You guys are talking doctors, okay? We're just a bunch of hillbillies here. Okay? And we're right after the footprints. We're right after anything we can find that we can go and track that animal. Bill's a hell of a tracker.
You're a scatologist?
Yes, sir.
You know your shit, right?
Just like you said earlier, you tell what an animal's eating.
What do you get? You got like rats and squirrels and deer and what? What do you got? Anything? What's that, mountain moles?
Ground moles.
Oh, okay.
Tracked one for almost a half a mile. I was in the middle of a group of 3. We were split up on 2 hillsides hunting. And there it was. I kept seeing these ground moles. And the whole ground was just erupted and ripped up. Go a little farther. There it is again. On about the 7th, 8th one, I went probably 500 yards. And that sucker had covered his footprint up with leaves. That's what it had done. I pulled the leaves back because it was roughed up dirt. A nice hair on the tree, exactly what he said. It came back inconclusive. It's always going to do that. And Huck came over. They were on the other hillside. We were there, investigated that spot, just like a crime scene for over 2 hours. And we got yelled at for that because 2 hours is a lot of time in production, but we got to do it.
Right.
And the thing of it is, we got a hair, we got a foot casting, and it's some of the best footprint we have ever seen. And that creature grabbed that tree, wrapped his arm around it, and shoved into the tree, and there was the most simplest tree structure you had ever seen. Just 2 cross trees. And the trees that were there were not of any type that was near there. He had drug them there. We'd been in and out right there, but this was just a path through the woods. It was just a random path. Nobody's planting footprints out on a random path. How would they ever find them? What good would it do them? And this was it. But the key punch to this whole thing, every time we moved forward, and after we investigated that and moved forward, we Piper cub up over top, and it would move forward also. We were there, what, 3 hours?
Well,
4 hours?
They left one time for a short period and come back.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's when we felt that maybe the government really does have trackings on them, because I talked to a lady here and she was saying about how the helicopter came in, put the nets down, took the animals out, they'd shot, and they were Bigfoot.
Interesting. Speaking of which, I had a show once where we talked about, it was on the anniversary of Mount St. Helens erupting. I turned it into a Bigfoot show. And the reason why was because I had heard rumors that there was a decrease in Bigfoot sightings in Cougar, 8Ks, those old areas after St. Helens blew. Are we seeing an increase or decrease in those general areas of Bigfoot sightings here in the Northwest?
I would say increase. Volcanic activity is, a lot lower right now, and it would seem to me that if they're creating babies, there would probably be more.
Because the reason why I think I saw my Bigfoot sighting was because there happened to be a fire burning on the north side of Adams when it happened. And I think moving the Bigfoot through the area there, Skamania and Klickitat, I think, you get a lot of you get a lot of Bigfoot that want to get away from it, right? So I don't know. I just am fascinated how they would be moving through and what they would do in their habitat and what they do. Speaking of which, we always got to get into the discussion of how do Bigfoot handle their dead. We know that, I mean, not many of us have found a carcass of any animal, cougar or otherwise, in the forest when we're out there. Not many of us go to the forest and don't even understand that. That's what people say, well, there's never been a carcass found or any bones found or what have you. Which leads me to believe, and maybe, I mean, we get an opinion going down the list here, going down the panel here, that they bury their dead. Or someone even suggested they eat their dead. I know that's really harsh to hear, but think about it. They could do that. What is your opinion on it? We'll get Dr. Miller's opinion on the panel.
I don't think they're eating their dead. I would agree with what Derek said. If something dies in the forest and no one else is around, if their family members aren't around, it's just going to fall in the forest and then all the bugs, and it's going to decompose right there. And I don't know this, but I think if a Sasquatch and its clan and its family saw somebody injured or hurt, they're going to help it, and they're going to pull it all over and help it and take it somewhere and try to heal it. If they can't heal it, they're going to give it a burial. That's my opinion.
What do apes do, Dr. Meldrum? I mean, do they grieve their dead? Do they bury their dead?
They don't bury their dead, no. There is evidence of grieving. I mean, it's sometimes infants, when the mother passes, if the infant isn't taken in by another member of the group, if they're social, I mean, if they're in groups like chimps or gorillas, then they sometimes die of that grief or neglect. But I'm kind of two minds. I mean, because the one part of this model that I've offered to explain or to estimate size rests also upon some idea of their social structure. And we have some clues. Almost all the sightings and all the footprint finds are solitary individuals or females with offspring in tow, which suggests that they tend to be, or at least forage, solitarily. And the primate that is the most solitary, the great ape, is the orangutan, and it gives us then perhaps a basis of comparison. The biggest difference between, say, gorillas and orangutans, the gorillas, the male maintains a harem, dominates the females. In contrast, a male gorilla doesn't dominate the females, he dominates a territory and excludes other males from that territory. That territory happens to include several females. And then they, when they're receptive, and it's pretty infrequent, every 6-7 years or so, they seek out the dominant male to mate at that time. So if Sasquatch is that way, then we have this model which actually fits some of the units that Cliff made reference to. In Northern California, we were now familiar with Patty back in the 60s, but there was, as you saw on my table, if you saw that big, what was clearly a male footprint, the crew footprint, and he was probably the beau. He was the big dominant male in that area. And there's several others, both juvenile offspring of some of those females and perhaps some other females. So, well, that's my train of thought. They're dead. The question then of what happens when they die. Well, animals like that are relatively solitary, there aren't unspecific. There aren't other members of their species to notice that they're getting old and decrepit and take care of them and then bury them or eat them. They die usually a solitary, lonely death, and they secrete themselves off out of the way so that their bones just aren't found scattered upon the thing. Now, having said that, the nest site presents a really interesting alternative scenario, and that is that maybe when they are largely dispersed, but their vocalizations could serve one of two purposes. They're either using the vocalizations to maintain distance, to keep dispersed, or they're using the vocalizations to draw them in on occasion. And perhaps things like a birthing event, as we speculated, brings them together. Maybe one that's old and decrepit has a different call, and that call brings in others that come to be with it at the time of death, and in which case maybe then they would be capable of burying one another or consuming. I mean, that's possible. Cannibalism is, there's evidence of that in the fossil record with Neanderthals, and possibly Homo erectus, and so those possibilities exist.
Clyde, can I do that for a second?
Go ahead.
One of the things that jumps out at me in the presentation, at the end of our presentation, one of the weirdest things about Sasquatch, again, one that's always eaten on me since the very first day I started looking into this, is how do they know to stay away from us? How do they know to stay hidden? So obviously, it's painfully obvious that they have this huge desire to stay hidden from us. So I think that if one was to expire in a clan or a family group, I think there's a high possibility that they would bury it to make it go away, so it's not laying there. I think they are smart enough to know that a hiker could stumble upon a dead carcass. I think they're deeper than that. I would imagine, I'm sure that they mourn, and just the sheer act of burying their dead would help keep their anonymity. Again, every situation is different. If a human dies in a hospital, it's there. If a human dies in the woods, it might never be found. If a Sasquatch is leading an alone life out in the woods and it expires and it knows it's going to expire, it'll probably go down and do what a bear does. Get buried down, bury itself in a ravine, get somewhere very dark and quiet, and expire there. But I do, the longer I think about this, it would only make sense for them to bury their dead if they were together when one expired.
Cliff, can you tell me more about your tooth? Not that tooth. You had a great smile, I know, but still.
I really can't tell you more about the tooth, honestly. I did learn, obviously I showed it to Dr. Meldrum, and he informed me that one of the more commonly found teeth in the woods even are actually from fish. Not necessarily trout, like fossilized sea fish, basically, because lots of places were the sea floor at one time. Although it does look a lot like a primate tooth at the end of the day. It looks a lot like that gigantic tooth. But again, I don't know what to do with it to get deeper in, I suppose. I need to contact a lady and get it to someone who knows far more than I do. But as I mentioned in my presentation, that's one of my superpowers, is knowing my own ignorance. And so I'm blessed with tons of ignorance that I can go find other people to help me out with some things. So I wish I could tell you more about that too.
Good, maybe we'll hear more about it another time. We'll hear more about it because I think it's a fascinating find. I mean, that's what it is. If it is what it is, you got an amazing find right there. Yeah, I think so. Okay, so here's a question. I guess you guys are going to hate me for asking this question. I got to ask it. So the other night when I did my Bigfoot show, luckily I didn't take the call because the call hung up, thank God. But what do you do when people come to you and say that they believe that Bigfoot is an interdimensional being? Anyone want to take that one on? Anyone? Because I didn't know what I was going to say, really, because I don't like Bigfoot being put in a UFO. I just don't like it. It makes me feel uncomfortable. You didn't take it on?
I'll take it on.
Okay, take it on.
Some here might not like my answer, but oh well. I firmly believe that Bigfoot is flesh and blood, and I will never change my mind on that. I've over 35 years of doing this. And I apologize to anybody that doesn't agree with me. I don't mean to offend you at all. To each his own, and maybe I'm wrong about everything I'm saying. But one thing I have witnessed in real time through Bigfoot research, once somebody starts researching Bigfoot, not everybody, but some people, they'll do it for a certain period of time, and then they very quickly learn how incredibly hard it is. We're trying to study something and learn about something that doesn't even technically exist. So it either makes us crazy or stupid or determined, I'm not sure what it is. But a lot of times this dynamic that I've witnessed, that we've all witnessed, after a few years, I think ego, maybe a little bit of arrogance kicks in, and it's like, well, man, there was something to learn here. I would have learned it by now. And then people start reaching. Well, maybe because I haven't figured this out, maybe they can disappear. Maybe they can cloak. Maybe they can mind speak. Not saying it doesn't happen, but I've just seen researchers that start out black and white following the scientific method fly away to other explanations that are more simple and easier for them to understand. Because if you give yourself an out, like Bigfoot can vanish, makes your research a little bit easier. Well, that explains that. No, the fact of the matter is, in my opinion, these are incredibly elusive, intelligent creatures. They more than likely move in a militaristic fashion when they're grouped up for avoidance and moving for purpose and doing what they do. They're smart. They're hard to study. This is a hard field to do. It's a lot of fun, but you can't jump into this expecting quick results. It's not going to happen. So what my suggestion is you stay the course, think what you think, and stay the course, and just understand that it's going to be hard. Evidence is going to be very slow to come. And don't start grasping for the paranormal or for the starships or for the mind speak. Just my opinion. Don't mean to offend anybody, but I'm firmly black and white, flesh and blood.
Mundane answers are the best answers. I always tell people that. It's always the mundane answer first. If you decide you want to venture out further, fine. But you got to have some pretty damn good evidence to show that the mundane is far more. There's something far more outrageous than the mundane. Because I get in arguments all the time saying, well, why do we have to say that Bigfoot vanishes in some dimensional vortex? Why doesn't he just sprout wings and fly away? I mean, what puts you in that mindset that you're going to put him in the same realm as Elvis and Jim Morrison on a UFO? It's not going to work for me. And that's basically how I see it, because it's like Bigfoot right now is having a resurgence, whether you know it or not. I mean, take a look what the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature is going to be this year. It's going to be Missing Link. I don't know if you guys have heard of that movie. The Missing Link was Leica's film that they submitted out of Hillsboro, Oregon. It's about a young Bigfoot that wants to find his Himalayan cousins, Yetis, and it's going to probably get the Academy Award. And there was another movie called Smallfoot, where the kids are going in to see little Smallfoot. And then there's Abominable, another one about the Abominable Snowman. So, there is a resurgence for the younger crowd. Remember how we were when we were kids? We had In Search of Bigfoot and Monsters and The Man Who Knew Too Much. I mean, all these different films that they put out that had, either Peter Graves or Leonard Nimoy in search of talking about. We were raised on those things, and we had the curiosity. The kids are getting animation now, and they're going to be curious too in the future. So it's up to us to continue the story. You see, and if we're going to continue the story in some outrageous way, saying that these Bigfoot come down like Chaka from Land of the Lost, they come out of a UFO and start speaking whatever. I don't know if that's going to be believable as much as it is to do the science. So that's why I think it's important that we focus on the mundane far more than we focus on the outrageous. Hearing your stories, even though they're like right there in the woods and doing all that, they're exciting, but they're also mundane in the same way. I mean, you haven't seen some strange flying saucer come down with Chewbacca coming out of it, have you? You haven't seen any of that, have you?
You need to get an open mind. Because you're sitting there trying to tell these people, well, this is this and this and this. But let me tell you something right here. I dealt one that's called the Kier Run Devil up in Washington County, Ohio.
I know about cryptids, dude. I believe in them.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
This deputy could not track this dog. I told this story the other night. This is true. Okay? I've not seen it happen. I've only heard of it. I've heard of the light. But have you crossed a magnetic field where your compass goes jumpy?
Oh, yeah. Those are known. They're called Rosen bridges. Einstein talked about it.
Correct. That's what I believe that there is happening.
Well, you're talking about like the Jersey Devil coming through or something else, but not Bigfoot, right? You don't think Bigfoot comes through the old dimension, do you?
I do.
You do?
I do.
And this whole time I've been talking crap right in front of me.
No, you haven't.
Okay.
I'm open-minded.
And I'm not.
Believe you. But if I didn't have my opinion, I wouldn't be on this side of the table.
Well, you've been there. I've not been there. I sit in front of a microphone.
I laughed at him when he talked to me about it because he says, I'm chasing my dog Beauregard, and he's gone. I said, well, dude, he's chasing that Bigfoot that's in that area, and he's going through. He said, well, every time I got up close, and he, honest to God, he stood there and he said, I don't know what it is. We were in the evening. I'm not sure it was the sunlight or whatever, but I'm seeing green flashes of light.
Right.
I know Kean all my life. Kean McLeish. He's a deputy sheriff. He's an auctioneer. He's a great person.
Right.
I don't think so. We kind of told him how to build a basic box trap to get the dog, and that's what he had to do, is he trapped it.
But we're looking at these things like, for example, Bigfoot would be more like, you're looking for more biological explanation. But when you're talking about things like the Jersey Devil and Mothman and all these other creatures that you guys have probably been hearing about, especially in West Virginia, that comes up along the lines of bottomless pit, scary characters sort of stuff.
Now, my uncle saw Mothman.
I want to talk to your uncle because I love Mothman. It's the scariest. Oh, okay.
I'd love for you to talk to him.
Oh,
okay. But here's this point. He was one that dove on the 46 that passed away on the bridge. in Point Pleasant.
Oh, he was on Point Pleasant Bridge. He was on the steel bridge.
He did. He saw Mothman.
Before the bridge broke.
No.
Oh.
This was during the evacuation of the dead bodies out of the ground.
Oh my God, that was sad.
It was. It was very
Christmas
sad.
presents down the Ohio River, I heard.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Great story though. Mothman is one of the scariest, I think. And yeah, so I think that came from some strange place.
If Buck was here, I'd let you answer. Don't look into the eyes.
The red eyes?
Yeah, the red eyes did him down on the ground.
Wow. Okay. I get into some scary territory of my word. I had nightmares about Mothman, so.
Come to Ohio.
I'm checking the time here. Ooh, okay. Now, I say that we should have questions from the audience. I think we've talked a lot about this stuff, but I think that what really works is we can get some great questions from you guys. So we have a few minutes to do that. So I suggest we get the roving mic going on here and getting people to ask some questions. I'd love to hear them, but we'd like to, have them answer. Okay, we have somebody down here.
Hi, my name is Mike Wazowski. This is Rainbow. We're researchers. We've been doing it for most of our lives. We spent a lot of time in New Mexico. We lived in Mexico, and I did the UFO forum down there for 8 years, and we brought in people from all over the United States for various subjects, UFOs and Sasquatch, etc. One of the questions, or one of the things I wanted to ask all of you is, you do realize that in the Southwest, in the high desert, there's plenty of Sasquatch sightings, tons of them. We worked with the Native Americans on various reservations, and many amazing stories. And we worked with the police also on the reservations, and Sasquatch is everywhere in the Southwest. Now, I've been in other parts of the country, Utah, and lived here. Right now, we live here in Oregon, and I believe, and I lived in along the Appalachian Mountains. We're everywhere, and there's a lot of them. I don't know if I agree with your numbers, not my research, but I think there's more, to be honest with you. So my question...
How many of those are skinwalkers or something like that? That's why, because I'm from Utah, Duchesne, I know about Skinwalker.
We've been to Skinwalker Ranch.
Okay.
Did work at Skinwalker Ranch.
Okay, good.
We know quite a bit about that. We can tell you some amazing stories about Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, nothing happened.
That's a whole different story.
Okay.
But they came back to our house. That was the problem. But anyways, the bottom line is, you guys are really not addressing the other habitats, and there's plenty of them in the high desert. I'm telling you, the natives there, they go crazy with them, with the stories that we've heard. So, go ahead.
Now, one of the reasons we're not addressing other habitats, speaking for us, is we have day jobs. Bigfoot research is literally a hobby, and it's a glorified hobby. We're not scientists, we're not experts. We're maybe citizen scientists and enthusiasts about it. I do get asked all the time, so does Shane, so does Cliff, so does Dr. Meldrum, about other regions, us specifically. We only speak to the area we work in, and one more thing to your point, I'll give you my opinion after hearing yours.
Your mom keeps texting me.
To me, you have to take witness testimony in a certain way. I'm that guy, I'm that jerk that thinks about 90% of the sightings are not sightings at all. I think they're misidentification, misinterpretation, or outright bullshit, for lack of a better word. Maybe 5 to 10% are legitimate in my opinion. I could be dead wrong about any of this. But I think a lot of those sightings, just because there's a lot of sightings happening, that doesn't mean there's a lot of sightings happening, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I've interviewed a gazillion people over the years and done a lot of field investigations, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of times we found out it was a bear. It was a person. It was a picker. In fact, Derek and I were hiking, about a year ago, and this black thing stood up in the, remember that, in the woods? And we're like, holy moly, it was a Guatemalan picker, picking salal, brush picker, and black ring gear. So, if you don't do your due diligence and actually go out and investigate or go further, it's a Sasquatch, right? It's a Sasquatch. And no offense to anybody, once again, but I want to bring this up. This is important to me. Orbs. I do have a podcast, and everybody talks about orbs. And I always go, what the heck has orbs got to do with Sasquatch? If you're in the woods and you see a light, sure, maybe it happens, maybe you see it. If you're already going in there with a Sasquatch plan, I'm investigating Sasquatch, and you see an orb, well, automatically it's tied together. A couple of years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we took a group out to the woods, and there was this glowing thing in the woods. there was this going in the woods, and I admit it was weird. I'd never seen anything like that. I was like, holy moly, that's crazy. We hiked down there and looked up the tree, and it's firebox, it's fungus, it's in the middle of the night, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Bright green.
It was a mushroom, firebox, and so. And it was a hike down, trust me. We had a long ways, but we wanted to figure out what the heck that was. But if you don't follow through with it, you just take it for, you know, you got that mind, oh, I'm out there looking for Sasquatch, there's nowhere. I mean, I'm sure some people claim they've seen a Sasquatch and an orb. Very, very rare. Very rare. Just your 2 cents.
Oh, you want to say something? Oh, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I would echo that too. I've learned long ago that I cannot rely on individual testimony about footprints, for example, because unless they've documented it, even those that have gone to the effort of documenting, of those, maybe 10% are it's not just the credibility, but are useful. Or we can conclusively say, oh yes, there you got a Sasquatch footprint. Everything else is ambiguous. I spoke down at Gallup, New Mexico, and I worked closely with the president of that university, who's a cultural anthropologist. We had probably 300 members of the Navajo tribe. We put out a map of New Mexico, and they put pins in. Pins fell completely within montane forest habitat. Nowhere else. It fringes maybe. Some excursions obviously are being made down into where the cultivated fields are. I mean, they're stealing squash and pumpkins and things like that at some of those farms. But, you know, you go over to Arizona, it's all concentrated in the Whitehall Apache Mountains on the reservation, not out in the middle of the desert except on rare occasions. And, hey, they move. They expatriate. I'm sure that if we consider that social structure, the young adult males get forced out by those big dominant males, and they have to strike out somewhere. Grover Krantz called these rogue males. And so sightings were found in out-of-the-way, unusual, atypical kinds of habitat or secondary or marginal habitat. So, right. Oh, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. The island habitats, yeah.
Great question. Great stuff. Thank you. Next.
Hey, bro. I did a lot of reading. I came
Put the mic right up to your mouth so we can hear you, please.
The topic is on the chupacabra. I'd like to comment on the two books I wrote. I had 2 books on it. My source on one, I don't know what that one was, Bob Top's Secret. There's an internet site by that name too. Well, about the chupacabra, no, it's a comment. The comment was the chupacabra was supposedly created in Cuba with capsules, right? And it was scientific warehouse. We're doing experiments, and that's how it's supposedly.
Yeah, I heard that too, and also Puerto Rico as well. Yes.
This is a question for all you guys up there on the panel. With the footprints and with the Bigfoot as a species, does the evidence suggest to you that these are, the small prints are juveniles, or is there any chance that, again, I've done a lot of reading of the Native American lore, that there are little people, and then of course the big people, the Bigfoot. Has any of the evidence ever suggested to you that a small print is a fully grown adult? In the case of Dr. Milgram, Homo floresiensis, or some relative of those hobbit type people, have you seen encounters or had evidence? Just each of your thoughts are on that.
Well, my experience with stories of the little people, even from members of the same tribe, like the Umatilla, for example, you'll get people who will describe little people that are 3 feet tall. You get descriptions of people like the borrowers that are this. You know, one guy woke up and there was one standing on his chest looking at him, and he was decked out in buckskins, and he followed him back and found his little camp with little teeny tiny teepees and fireplaces and so forth. You know, so I don't know what to make of that. How much? I mean, because there is folklore. There are fairy tales. You know, what we would call fairy tales in our culture. And whether those are based on any real-life experiences or some interpretation or who knows what. But I know the little feet that I'm familiar with, all the examples seem to fit the mold of a non-human, small, hominoid foot. An archless, extremely broad. If you haven't seen, did David bring the little? You've got to see this. It's like a little, someone's little, cast of a little foot, or of a baby's foot, except it has this gigantic heel and heel pad that would be so typical of a Sasquatch foot. It's really quite remarkable. That might represent an infant that's just barely, if even, ambulatory at that age. And I have in my collection, and Cliff does as well, examples that go right on up, from that size right on through. Now, the one thing that still has me kind of puzzled, but I haven't been able to pin down the credibility of it, is there's an upsurge of footprints that are indistinguishable from human. I mean, shoe-wearing humans, which some of the witnesses claim they find in extremely remote places. Upon doing due diligence, I find that sometimes they're not really as remote as the witness would suggest. One example, when he offered to take us to it, it was at a public beach with a paved parking lot and a changing room, changing the building, and he picked out the tracks that he had actually made casts of up on the mountain trails. He picked them out of the beach because they were very, very similar, if not identical. But I said, well, okay, let's follow them. We're on a sandy beach. We backtracked and went back to the rock that it had sat down on to take off its waffle treaded Vibram-soled boots, and we could check. Sorry. We could follow the boot tracks back to the parking lot. Well, he spent 2 hours looking beyond the parking lot for where this boot-wearing Bigfoot had come from. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, but there have been suggestions that there's some. But I mean, you can tell when you see a human footprint that has a footprint that has a marked arch, that good old button hook question mark shape to the longitudinal arch, and the little toe that's bent on its side, completely pushed in by, and all the toes are completely confined by shoe wear. And humans have that very distinctive look, the disproportionality of the big toe pad versus the second, third, fourth, fifth that come down, in a row. Very different than a typical Sasquatch track. So, if it walks like a human, if it looks like it, it smells like a human, it might be a human.
We're going to try and bump this up right at 7 o'clock. I do have one last question. Do you guys have a favorite MC today? That was your favorite?